Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com, and welcome to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoyGreen25, where New York Jets content all the time. And of course, we're here on a Monday. It's a mock draft Monday, and every Monday from the end of the Jets season all the way through the 2022 NFL draft, we've had a different guest on and will continue to have a different guest on each week to talk about Jets draft nuggets, draft content in general. And, well, this week we've got a very special guest. His name is Jacob Infante. He is the NFL draft analyst at the Draft Wire and also does some Chicago Bears coverage for Windy City Gridiron. Let's bring him on in. Jacob, what's poppin', man?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Thank you for having me on.
Of course, and let's also get this plug in immediately. Folks, keep your eyes out for this one. He has a draft guide dropping, his second one will be dropping here in about a month and change. Jacob, tell people about it and some of the intriguing factors and, of course, where they can find it.
Yeah, no. So I'm doing it on my Patreon where I did it last year and it went well, so I'm looking to do it again. I'm going to have a draft guide with my entire big board, every single player that I've watched, I'm going to have ranked. Last year, I was able to make it to 400, so I'm hoping to be able to expand upon that this year. I mean, we'll see. I don't know exactly how far I'm going to get, but it should be a pretty sizable big board. I'm going to have a 7-round mock draft, scouting reports for last year. I had the top 30 prospects. I might look to expand that to the top 50 this year, so we'll see. But scouting reports, mock drafts, big board rankings. It's not all. It's mostly general NFL draft stuff. I know I'm a Chicago Bears guy, so I do have a little bit of Bears content in there in terms of breaking down what their positional outlook looks like for now and the future, and where they could target that in the draft. But it's predominantly just general NFL stuff, scouting reports, big board rankings, what have you. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. It should be coming out sometime in March. I don't have a set date for it yet, but yeah, just make sure to look out for it.
Jacob, I know you're a Bears guy, so I want to do you a favor right off the top because this is a New York Jets channel here. I know the Bears don't have a first-round pick. They probably feel pretty good about it. They got Justin Fields last year, but I'm going to allow you and any of your Bears listeners and followers that start watching us here on the channel, you guys can vicariously live through us because we have 2 first-round picks. So you know what? You can live all your dreams and fascinations through the New York Jets. We can do that for you for this draft season.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I can't even name the last time the Bears have had 2 first-round picks in a draft. Like that would be like my Christmas basically. And I'm like obviously I'm very happy with trading for Justin Fields. I think that you need to take a swing at a quarterback, and hopefully from a Bears perspective, Justin Fields develops. He showed some promise as a rookie. Obviously, still some work to be done there, but it's worth it, in my opinion, to be able to take that move up for a quarterback. So I'm excited. The Jets are one of the teams that I'm honestly looking forward to seeing the most because they've had a handful of different directions they could go, and they've got a lot of draft capital to do it. So it should be a lot of fun to watch.
Let's do a quick diatribe on that, actually, because the Jets, when they had the number 2 overall pick, obviously, you know, we figured, and it ended up being true, that when the Jets had a couple somewhat meaningless wins at the end of the year, they took themselves out of the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. So then it all became like, okay, who's the guy at number 2 then? And Zach Wilson entered the conversation. There were Justin Fields fans. But ultimately, from a Jets perspective, both Jets fan and reporter here perspective, it seemed like it was either going to be Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. It didn't seem like Treylon was in the conversation. Obviously, it didn't seem like Mac Jones was in the conversation. But fans were split. Half of them kind of jumped on the BYU train and rode that thing. But there was a strong Justin Fields contingent, and they were quite upset when the Jets went Zach Wilson instead of Fields. So give us the Fields perspective real quick for the Bears. Obviously, you rode the Andy Dalton train for a little while and kind of bounced around with some injuries. But how was the experience for Justin Fields, and how optimistic, I guess, are Bears fans about his progress and heading into 2022?
Yeah, so generally Bears fans are pretty encouraged. I think that he's shown flashes that maybe no quarterback has shown in the rookie season Bears history, or at least if not in Bears history, then at least in a long time, because he showed, in my opinion at least, he showed better flashes than Mitch Trubisky did back in 2017. Looking at that point, it's just like Rex Grossman. I mean, Kyle Orton had a good rookie year. but it's not a very extensive group of quarterbacks in this franchise's history. But the highs were definitely high. I mean, I keep mentioning, look back at the Steelers game in prime time to see how he did. He was able to stretch the field efficiently. Deep ball accuracy is something that he really brings to the table that this team hasn't had consistently very often in its history. So I'm excited for that. And obviously he's an incredible athlete for the position. I think that he does sometimes trust his arm a little bit too much. Decision-making can improve. Pocket awareness can improve. I think there are some instances where instead of climbing the pocket and keeping his head up, he just rolls out, and that makes it more susceptible to getting sacked. So just some of the little things, but I think that the upside is definitely there with him. And I think that this year is going to be big for his development, and I'm excited to see what happens.
By the way, speaking of that Pittsburgh game, it suddenly, as soon as you spoke on it, I was thinking of all the highlights in my mind, and one of them was, Justin Fields getting mugged a couple of times, and the ref not throwing that penalty, and I'm like, good Lord. And a couple of times, and I don't know if Justin Fields did this throughout the whole season. I didn't get to see every Bears game, but a couple of times, once he gets hit, he kind of like lays out for a second, like he's dead, like he's throwing his hands back and kind of lays there like a dead fish. But a couple of times in the Pittsburgh game, I'm like, Jesus Christ, it was like Cam Newton treatment. It's like he's so big that sometimes refs are like, he could take it, as opposed to actually just calling the game and officiating it the way that it should.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely fair. I think that seeing a quarterback who's athletic as he is, and, he's built pretty well too. Like he's 6'2", which is, that's solid QB height. And he's got I want to say he's like 220, 225, something like that. So he's got a little bit of muscle on him there. But yeah, no, I think that the offensive line had its ups and downs, and in that game in particular, I think the refs kind of screwed him over a little bit. I don't want to be that guy who's like always blaming the refs for everything, but I mean, there were some blown calls in that game for sure.
All right, let's before we get into all the draft stuff, there are a couple that just came to me. Bears free agents to be potentially that could have interest around the league. I'll start with Allen Robinson because Jet fans have seemingly wanted Allen Robinson forever, and just for one reason or another, it just didn't happen. Whether an initial free agency or the franchise tag or what have you. Do the Bears plan on bringing him back? And if not, like, what kind of player is he? Because obviously he went through a tough year, both with, just a little bit of everything, it seemed like last year.
Yeah, so I think that Allen Robinson, he did have a down year this year, but I think that there's still a lot of talent there. I think he's obviously a very gifted receiver. He's physical, he's big, he's intelligent, he can run routes well. And just because he's not like a speedster or anything, and just because he doesn't have those highlight consistent flashes of ankle breakers, I guess, as a route runner, doesn't mean he doesn't get open. And he often gets open just enough to be able to make the catch. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So with Allen Robinson, I think that last year, Matt Nagy didn't get the best use out of him. I think that he wasn't targeted nearly as much as he should have been. And there wasn't as much of an emphasis on him in that offense, which I don't know why. And I think once Robinson kind of picked up on that, he was like, okay, well, I'm not being treated like a wide receiver one here. I'm not going to try like a wide receiver one. So I think that the effort did slow down a little bit in the second half of the year, but you're still looking at a guy who's very talented. I think can be a good wide receiver one in the league. I don't think he's coming back to Chicago. I mean, we'll see what happens. It's a new regime, new GM, new coach, and maybe they're able to sell him on sticking around for a little bit. But we'll see. I think that Robinson's going to get a good amount of interest from other teams around the league.
I think so too. I think he's widely respected around the league, and he is that guy that's just, it's not his fault, but Blake Bortles and Andy Dalton and this poor bastard has been, getting whatever quarterback play that has happened to trot out, and I feel for the guy. So hopefully he does. And one other player, real quick, that a lot of Jets people have been talking about is James Daniels, who I loved coming out of the draft for the versatility and the experience across the board. What about him? It seems like he could command some money. Does he shake free, or does Chicago kind of make sure they hold him down and make sure he doesn't escape?
So I'm honestly torn on that because I feel like James Daniels is a solid guard. He's athletic. He's smart. Maybe not a true mauler in the run game, but he gets the job done. He's a bit more than serviceable, and I think he's going to get big money because of that. I think most salary cap projections, people who know a lot more about that than I do, have him getting like somewhere between like 8 to 11 million annually. So decent money for sure.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know if the Bears are going to pay that or not, because obviously you want to be able to protect Justin Fields to the best of your ability. But Ryan Poles, the new Bears general manager, said like, hey, the offensive line, more or less, he just said the offensive line needs to improve and he's going to make some changes there. So I don't know if he's going to invest money, like considerable money, in James Daniels. So I think there's a chance he comes back. I think it's more likely than Allen Robinson coming back, but I'm not so sure because they have a handful of other guys like Bilal Nichols, defensive lineman, Akeem Hicks, if they choose to bring him back. They've got a handful of tough decisions to make. So I do think that there's a possibility Daniels comes back, but I don't think it's set in stone.
Again, we're still got Jacob Infante here on Mock Draft Monday. Make sure you check him out and follow him at that very handle right under his beautiful face there. Jacob Infante 24, NFL draft analyst for the Draft Wire, and does work for the Chicago Bears. That's a Windy City Gridiron. But again, they're vicariously living through us during this draft. We got plenty of first-round picks to go around. And also, everybody, make sure you stop what you're doing. Hit the thumbs up on the YouTube page and also hit that subscribe button. We appreciate the support. This has been a great series so far. Let's talk about one of the mile markers that's coming up here, Jacob, and that's the NFL Combine. Now, I love the NFL Combine. People make fun of me and my radio job. I'm a sports talk radio host during the day. They call it the Underwear Olympics and say, you dweeb watching it. And obviously the evolution of prime time recently, and they're giving a lot of crap, but I love it. The 40-yard dashes and what the splits mean and how does that translate historically speaking. Like, I'm a nerd for all that stuff. But the thing I want to ask you is, do you like the fact that there's kind of these risers and fallers? Like we've had DK Metcalf that shoot up the draft board in theory. It didn't end up happening. It ended up going middle of the second round. But in theory, we see these guys rising and all of a sudden they surge up draft boards, or vice versa. Orlando Brown's a great example of it. Not so much working out. He stumbles down the draft board after having a terrible combine. Do you like the whole rising, falling, and how much stock should actually go into the NFL Combine on a year-to-year basis?
Yeah, so there's definitely some stock to be had in that. And I think that especially if a player tests better than one would expect, or they test significantly worse than one would expect, I think that it's eye-opening for sure. And I think that it's definitely something to take into account. But at the end of the day, the thing that matters most is the film, like what you can see on tape, what they consistently bring to the table. And depending on exactly how analytical some NFL franchises are, if you can get like game speeds and stuff like that, and just how efficient their movement is on the field instead of, just in the workout. So I think that there's a fine line between looking at, say, someone with like 5th, 6th round tape who like tests out of the gym and saying, oh, this guy's going to go early day 2 now. I think that that's a little bit of a stretch and a bit overreactive. I think that even NFL teams fall victim to that. They can overreact to guys who perform well at the combine, but it's something to take into effect for sure. I think it's, can't be dismissed, but it's not the end all be all.
Speaking of the tape, let's get into it. I've been waiting to do this with the right draft guy. Jacob, you're the right draft guy. The Jet fans, they found Elijah Moore on day 2 last year. Phenomenal. I love the player, and wow, the value. I still can't believe he was there at number 34 overall. Phenomenal. But now they need more. That's what Jet fans keep saying. They want a true number 1 wide receiver. And I feel like, to best describe this, and smack me if I'm wrong here, Jacob, with this wide receiver class in particular this year, it feels like a what's your flavor kind of draft. There's a lot of different guys that can do a lot of different things at the top, and maybe who the team is will determine who the receiver off the board is, as opposed to this consensus guy. Clearly insert is the number 1 over all the rest. And with that being said, I want to go through some of these flavors here so Jet fans can get to know who some of these top receivers on the board are and who should be the right pick, because there is a strong chance, I would imagine, I'd venture to guess, that they'll have their pick of the litter there with their 2nd first-round pick, 10th overall. Thank you, Jamal Adams and the Seattle Seahawks, for that one. So if that's the case, they need to make sure they pick the right guy, especially when you pick the first, when you set the tone for the entire wide receiver room, you pick insert guy and then others later. They're always going to be compared to each other throughout their career. So let's go through some of them here. And one of them that has intrigued Jet fans in a polarizing fashion is Drake London out of USC. Mel Kiper kind of said it with a couple weeks ago doing a mock where it's a Jets, Drake London. And some people see a poor man's Brandon Marshall to give that little hat tip to the pass. But other people have questioned separation and things of that nature and how that will or won't translate at the next level. What do you make of Drake London?
Yeah, so I'm going to be totally honest. I'm probably a bit lower on Drake London than the average draft analyst. I think that, and I mean, this is just me, having gotten burned by big-bodied receivers who excel at the catch point. Like, I like Hakeem Butler coming out of Iowa State. I like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside coming out of Stanford. Basically, that whole 2019 draft class. Not a couple good evaluations there. So I did adjust the way I look at receivers, and I do value separation a lot more now. So that's probably why I do have Drake London a bit lower. I think that he's a bit raw in terms of his ability to release off the line of scrimmage and to really sink his hips coming in and out of his breaks. I think that being as tall as he is, it can be a little bit tougher. And some receivers are able to overcome it, like a Julio Jones or a Calvin Johnson, but it's tough, But that in mind, I think that people will take advantage of the tools that London does bring to the table and look to pick him in the first round. I think the size is obvious. He's, incredibly huge catch radius. He's got really good ball skills. I think that his hands are a overrated. He's been a bit hit or miss for me in terms of he's make acrobatic catches look so easy, but some of the mundane plays have looked a little suspicious at least. And I mean, with that in mind, he's big, incredible ball skills. He's coordinated, good athlete. I think he'll run well in the 40 if he is able to run the 40 because he got hurt. But with that in mind, I'd say London will probably go late round one. I think that's a bit too early for those Jets picks, but he's someone to consider. If the Jets choose to trade down, I think he'd be a good value there.
100%. That's certainly on the table for the Jets. Joe Douglas, actually, whether or not you buy or sell, again, the same thing with draft rumors and free agency rumors that come out very early in the process. Through SNY, Joe Douglas apparently said, hey, man, we're open for business. So you want to call up for number 10. And that got out very early in draft season, which, again, could be smoke or it could be real. Like, hey, let's try to churn up some interest here and open that up and extend essentially the Jamal Adams blockbuster deal because that's the last pick of that package. If you could trade back to future assets, perhaps you could keep that train potentially rolling into the future. Let's go to Ohio State. Garrett Wilson. He's a guy Jet fans are in love with, but some have said, well, you kind of already have that vertical speed guy in Elijah Moore. Do you need another in Garrett Wilson? What does Garrett Wilson bring to the table besides that as well?
Yeah, I think Garrett Wilson's a very smooth athlete. I think that's the best way to describe it. He's got, very good deep speed. I think that he's, crisp, moving around across the middle of the field. I think that he offers a pretty good route package at the next level. I think there's a lot of tools for him to work with. Intelligent player, knows how to attack leverage, going through his stems and be able to attack a defensive back's blind spot. Physicality, it's all right. I think Garrett Wilson's not necessarily the strongest receiver in this class. I think that, looking at a Treylon Burks or, a Drake London in terms of that contested catch ability. But as far as someone who can get open, who can make some plays after the catch. He's not Tyreek Hill, but he's pretty good after the catch. He's got some good agility to him. And I think he's just a fundamentally sound receiver. He can step in. Realistically, I think he's a high-end 2 at the next level, a high-end wide receiver 2, and a borderline wide receiver 1. And I don't know exactly how high that goes in this class because, again, like you said, there's no consensus top guy, and it's all basically just off of who you prefer, really. So I think there's a good chance Garrett Wilson can go pretty early, but whatever happens, I think he'd be a good fit for the Jets because you can never have enough receivers who can get open. You can never have enough speed in an offense as long as you use it properly. So I think that would be something to consider for the Jets for sure.
That's a good point and a good counterpoint to people who have brought that up on social media. Let's go to this guy, and this one I'm confused with, Jacob. So I'm going to be looking for answers here. Chris Olave, I'm going to be honest. I was flabbergasted that he returned to school last year. I went, okay, I guess maybe he knows better than me. I would have tried to secure the bag, but hey, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And so he comes out this year, and he's here in this draft class, but I'm not hearing the same hype. Like all of a sudden, like all the production he put up last year is like made people hate him more for some reason. I don't know. Are you also hearing similar things with him not being quite in that top upper echelon with some of the people that I've spoken with? Are you hearing the same things? And give us the Olave pitch.
Yeah, so I honestly disagree with that in terms of him not being in that top tier. And I know that there hasn't been a ton of buzz around him, but in the grand scheme of things, I think you're still looking at a very good receiver. Honestly, a lot of the same things that you're looking at with Garrett Wilson, you see to an extent with Chris Olave as well. He's also another smooth athlete, someone who can stretch the field well. I do have Garrett Wilson a little bit higher on my board right now. I think he just offers a little bit more upside, but Olave is another guy who's, technically sound, maybe not the biggest guy out there, not the most elite lateral athlete after the catch, but like in the grand scheme of things, he knows how to get open and he can stretch the field pretty well. So why he isn't being talked about as a first round lock, as a top 20 lock, I don't know. And I saw a mock draft on NFL.com that had him going 39th overall to the Bears, actually, in round 2, which, I mean, if that happened, I'd be doing cartwheels. But realistically, I don't think, at least I don't think he should fall that far. So, again, maybe a little bit high for the Jets. If they trade back a little bit, then I think it's definitely a possibility. But I think he deserves to go somewhere around that 15-ish range. So, we'll see with him. I think that it only takes one team. So if there's a team that's really enamored with him, I think there's a possibility he goes higher than we expect.
Well, let's go with another guy that is falling and no fault of his own. It's just, and you hate to see this in whether it's just random bowl games or college football playoff, what have you. Jameson Williams gets hurt. And, like I said, it's the nature of the beast. It's a game. Football eats its young. You guys get hurt. It happens. How much does this affect his draft stock? Do people just continue to maintain the long-term image like, hey, okay, this hurts him a little bit here in the short term, but hey, we're still getting a phenomenal player here? Do you still think he's a first-round lock? And also, what does he bring to the table for those who perhaps haven't seen the film on Jameson Williams?
Yeah, so I do still want to say that Jameson Williams is a first-round lock. I don't know if I can say that definitively, but I think he does go round 1. I think he still goes first round because of the tape he put together. He's one of the most explosive receivers in the class. If you're looking for deep speed, just a guy who can stretch the field vertically, especially with Zach Wilson, with someone with that caliber of an arm, having a guy like Jameson Williams who can really unlock that potential, I think would be a good fit. I don't know exactly how far he'll fall because of the injury. I think that we'll see what happens with his development over the next couple months and see how his rehab's coming along. But again, his tape is really good. He's not only a game-breaking athlete, but he's also just another technically sound guy. I know I keep repeating the same terms, but it's a lot of those guys at the top, a lot of those athletic, smooth, route-running type of guys who can get open. I think Williams is a bit faster than a Garrett Wilson or a Chris Olave. Maybe not as physical. I think that Jameson Williams is a little bit skinny. I think he could stand to add like 5 or 10 more pounds of muscle to his frame at the next level. But in the grand scheme of things, just because he's a little bit skinny doesn't mean he can't get open. Like he still does well against press, even if he's not the type of guy who can consistently like win with power in terms of his hands there at the stem. But it's still a very good receiver who'd be he'd be in the wide receiver 1 conversation for me, absolutely, if he didn't get hurt. And now that he's fallen down a little bit on my board, but he's still someone I think deserves to go round 1 for sure.
All right, I have to ask this question because it intrigued me as I'm thinking about it, because Alabama obviously has been an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver position. As I looked through some of these names before we did this interview, and I'm just like, man, oh, let's just take a gander at some of the receivers that have been drafted high from Alabama, from Jalen Waddles, Devontae Smith, and going even back, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Julio Jones, Amari Cooper. I mean, blah, 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 blah. I mean, where does Jameson Williams rank among all of these great Alabama wide receivers that have come out?
Let's see. So that's tough. I got to think here. So
yeah.
I don't know necessarily if he's as high as some of those guys. I mean, this is just coming from me. I really like Jerry Jeudy coming out of Alabama. And I think that as athletic as Williams is, he doesn't have like that 4.2 speed that Henry Ruggs or Jalen Waddle had at Alabama. So a little bit farther down, plus considering the injury and the fact he's only had one like actual year of significant production, that has a little bit lower than those guys, but not by much. You know, that's not a knock on him necessarily. It's just, you know, the way my grading scale goes. I do take into account to a small extent production, and I think that Williams, as fantastic as he was this past year, I think that having a little bit more outside of that would have been huge. So I'd say just a tier below, you know, like an Amari Cooper, like a, you know, Waddle, Jeudy, Ruggs, Smith, guys like that, but not too far, honestly. I think at the end of the day, I'll probably have a late first rounder on him, but which that's nothing to be ashamed of by any means.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you about one more receiver, and then we're going to put you on the spot, as we do with every guest that joins us. You're forced to do a mock draft for the Jets. And, of course, if you'd like to send any of your love, hate, or ridicule for those picks, at Jacob Infante 24 on Twitter. I'm sure he would love it. So we'll do that in just a minute. But the receiver that Jet fans have fallen in love with, head over heels with, is Treylon Burks out of Arkansas. So I have to ask you, what do you make of the kid? And there's been a lot of, and it's natural, I guess, with the Jets 49ers connections, that people have said, oh man, a poor man's Deebo Samuel, a guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. And Jet fans are kind of desperate to find that with the Saleh, Mike LaFleur, and all those 49ers connections. So is that fair to throw that kind of label on him? Or is he his own man? And what does he bring to the table?
So I honestly think that Treylon Burks is a bit more AJ Brown than Deebo Samuel, which it's still similar skill sets. I mean, both very good receivers who, I think Treylon Burks has a lot of potential at the next level. When you consider his size, he's like 6'3" and something absurd like 230. You know, he's just built incredibly well. And keeping that in mind with his speed, his agility after the catch, is he raw? Absolutely. And I think that he's someone that you're going to need an offense that knows how to work around him and to be able to utilize him. Otherwise, there's a chance he could bust out because he's maybe not as efficient in terms of his quickness coming out of his breaks. But agility after the catch is there. Contact balance after the catch is there. Speed's there. Physicality's there. Ball skills are there. Hands are there. You bet on that physical upside. And I think that there's certainly a bust potential with Burks, more so than there is with the average, top receiver prospect. But if that offense, that Jets offense, is able to maximize his talents, which, I mean, it comes from the Shanahan tree. So, there's a strong possibility, that they can. I wouldn't hate that pick with, 10th overall?
Yeah.
So not 4th, but I wouldn't hate Treylon Burks at 10, honestly. I think the upside's worth taking a swing there, even if he's currently not my wide receiver 1, but he's close, and I totally understand if people have him at wide receiver 1 just because of the upside that he brings.
All right, Jacob, let's put a cherry on top of this pie. Okay, I'm going to put you up on it. And for the first 2 rounds, the Jets have number 4, number 10, number 35, and number 38. And you play GM. You can do whatever you want with these picks. This is all up to you. I'm just the conductor of the train, and I'm just pointing everybody in the direction that you're going. You can trade them. You can keep them. You can do whatever you want. The world is your oyster. And like I said, fans, share all your love and hate, not at BoyGreen25, at Jacob Infante 24, please. And thank you. With that being said, Jacob, put on your GM cap. You are now on the clock for the New York Jets, the number 4 overall pick. Where do they go?
So this one's tough. I think that in a draft class like this, it's so unpredictable what's going to happen in the top 3 picks. So it's kind of tough to see, okay, who's going to be available? Is it going to be a Kayvon Thibodeau who falls, and Evan Neal who falls, or whatever? So I'm really interested in seeing what happens, but I'm just assuming that the first 3 picks are some combination of Evan Neal, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau. I'm just assuming that's the top 3 and working with that. So, I'm going to go with, give me Ika Mekwonu. I'm going to go with the offensive tackle out of NC State. I think that he's tenacious. He's technically sound. He's a very good athlete for his size, and the upside's fantastic, I think. And he's got long arms, but he's a bit shorter, so he's lower to the ground. And he has flexible enough hips where he's able to maximize his lower half and really recoil, I guess, that power and generate torque. He's a lot of fun to watch. So I almost went with Derek Stingley here, the corner out of LSU. I know he's a popular target for the Jets, but I'm going Ekwonu here. I think he'd be very helpful for that Jets offensive line.
Icky's a freak, and I love the pick. So that's, I mean, Jet fans are, poking every voodoo doll in the world that came on Thibodeau and this weird slide for his personality or whatever. It doesn't. If that works, then fine. He's got the crappiest personality in history. Down the board to the New York Jets. But I think more so if reality grabs everybody and slaps people around, like, come on, Kayvon Thibodeau, he, Aiden Hutchinson, and Neal are going to be some combination of the first 3 picks. I agree with you. And I don't think Icky is that bad of a consolation prize, to be honest with you. All right. Again, and I think you're 100% right. It's not like a cop-out. It's true that, like, at 4, you're like, God, who knows what could happen at 4? Well, this is only going to get more difficult as we go deeper down this draft, which this speculation on who could be this and who could be where. So as we kind of build through some of that speculation, we'll now slide down to the number 10 overall pick here for the New York Jets. It's not the first time they've had 2 first-round picks. They just did this recently back in the Sheldon Richardson D. Milner draft. Now, of course, that one didn't work out as well for the New York Jets. Sheldon Richardson was the defensive rookie of the year. Great. D. Milner busted out, never played for another NFL team in his life. That's when you made a good pick, when no one else even takes a chance. They just do it. So that's great news. So let's go to number 10 overall for the New York Jets. You just gave them Icky. Now what happens at 10?
Yeah, so again, a lot of different directions you can go in, and pardon the movement there. I was just charging my laptop because I realized I was low on battery. Didn't want to die on me there, but yeah, no. So at 10, again, you could look corner here. You could look receiver. I think those are 2 positions that you really want to focus on.
Sure.
I'm going to go with, if he's available in real life, which I think there's a chance he is at 10. I'll go with Sauce Gardner.
Yeah.
Cincinnati. I think that if the Jets get some combination of Ekwonu and Gardner in that first round, I mean, those are 2 building blocks right there. I think Gardner's a stud corner, which they don't really have, correct me if I'm wrong, a ton of talent at the cornerback position. That's the type of guy you can shadow against the best in the league. It doesn't matter who it is. He's someone who can shut down almost anyone. So from the length to the physicality to the fluidity to the ball skills, he's practically a well-rounded in every area. So it wouldn't shock me at all if he's the first corner off the board, even before Stingley or like an Andrew Booth Jr., but there's a lot to like with him. So if he's available at 10, I'd say Sauce Gardner, Ahmad Gardner. That's what I'd go with there at 10.
Yeah, and they got a lot of number 2 and number 3s. I loved Bryce Hall coming out of the draft a bunch of years ago. Again, we talked about unfortunate injuries affecting your kind of path to the draft, so to speak. And that obviously happened with Hall. So they got, and Brandon Eccles was a great day 3 dart throw last year. So, they got a lot of 2s and 3s, but they lacked that number 1. And Sauce obviously would be that. What a phenomenal first round. Okay, let's dive into the second round before we get you out of here, Jacob. Again, number 35 and 38. We'll start with number 35 overall. And I will say this every single time. People may be annoyed at this point because I've been saying it every time as we do the second round part of the mock. These are my favorite picks. You reset the day. Day 1 is over. You get to eat, sleep, breathe, think, take phone calls, trades, anything else. And these are basically quasi first round picks because players always fall. It's natural. Something happens where players are on the board. So these are quasi first round picks. So 4 top 38 picks for the Jets. Let's go to 35. They got 2 nice. They got a defender and they got someone on the offense. Now where do they go here at 35?
Yeah, so this is one, and I don't. Again, I'm gonna clarify. I don't know if he's available here in real life.
Yeah,
I think
right.
there's a chance he goes round one, which is the case with a lot of the guys that you're going to find early second round. They'll be like, wait, how did he fall out of round one?
Exactly.
And I think that with the general confusion at the wide receiver position in this class, there's a lot of talent, especially for late first rounders. I think that could cause someone to fall. So give me Jahan Dotson, wide receiver out of Penn State.
Okay.
I know there are some similarities there between him and Elijah Moore, but I think that he's a talent that you probably can't pass up at that point in the second round. I think that the agility, the route running skills for someone who's a bit smaller, he's sub 6 foot, like 185 pounds, but he's really good at the catch point, and that just goes to show how good his hands are and how good he is at boxing out on the 50-50 ball. So I think that does translate to the next level. And, he's not a one-trick pony. He can basically do it all. So if Dotson's available, if he falls out of round one, which there's a possibility of, I think that's a direction you could go in for sure.
Would have loved to see him at the Senior Bowl. Unfortunately, other circumstances affected that. We weren't able to, but a phenomenal player. And again, players are going to fall that we're like, how the hell is this guy here? I could certainly see Dotson being that guy. I think he would go in the first round. But, we say that about 50 guys. 50 guys get first round grades. Well, there's only 32 teams, so somebody's going to have to fall, and that could be Dotson. Great news for the Jets. Okay, let's round it out here, Jacob. Let's end on a bang. You've had a phenomenal draft so far. We'll see what the fans say live here and post on social media. But I think this has been a phenomenal draft so far. And number 38 now, where do we finish this thing off?
38. Okay, so there are a couple areas I could go with here. I'm honestly targeting defense here. I think, you've got your tackle, you've got your receiver. That's significant progress. And you could go with, sure, a tight end, but I don't know if there's a tight end worth taking this early. That's just me in this class. So I'm targeting an edge rusher here.
Ooh,
and I'm just thinking about who would be available then.
A lot of guys
I could go with. So I would say Drake Jackson out of USC. I don't know if he'd be available there. So for the sake of things, I'm going to assume he gets picked earlier because I think that his athletic tools, I think someone's going to take a shot on him earlier. So the guy I'm going to take a shot on is Boye Mafe, the edge rusher out of Minnesota. And there aren't too many guys, if anyone, who had a better Senior Bowl week than Boye Mafe. I mean, at the game itself, he had 2 sacks, was killing it in practice, and I've been able to watch his development over the last couple of years because he got on my radar not this most recent summer, but the one before, the 2021 draft, and he stayed. So I've been able to watch him over the last couple seasons, and he's really come into his own. He's always been, a lengthy, athletic guy who can rush the passer well, but he's improved as a technician, and I think that goes to show the mentality that he has, the motor he has, and I think there's a very high ceiling for him at the next level. Is he the type of guy who's going to come in right away and get 10 sacks? I don't think so. But I think that he's a good long-term piece for this defense, and especially for its Jets team that, they've struggled off the edge for the most part in recent years. So I think that getting a guy like Mafe, who's got almost unlimited potential, definitely an intriguing piece to build around going forward. So, yeah, Mafe with that second round pick. That's probably what I'm going to go with here.
Beautiful. And you mimic what Todd McShay said on the first draft here last week, that Mafe, again, has this unbelievable potential. Like only God knows what that could be. And phenomenal player. The thing I love, and I love when I see this with college players, each year you saw exponential growth in every major defensive statistical category for Mafe as he just rose up through the ranks. And that to me goes, okay, that arrow keeps pointing up and he keeps getting better and better every year. That would be phenomenal. Jacob, this may be one of the best mock drafts that anyone has had on this show. And we've had some great people from The Athletic and other great places here on the show, but that may be creme de la creme. We will find out from the fans, of course, who will rain their hellfire from above. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This is a cool series. Thank you so much for taking the time. The fans have really enjoyed this throughout the entire process. And another part for me is networking, and I love meeting new people. We do this series every year. This was cool. Thank you so much, man. We'll have to do this again down the road.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I had a great time, and I like being able to interact with like different fan bases and see where they're standing from a draft perspective. Because, you know, obviously being a Bears fan, I'm pretty in tune with what's going on there. So it's nice to get, you know, an additional perspective and just any opportunity to talk draft, really. So thank you for having me.